that time again, another episode of State of Mind with me, Richard Sefton. You can follow me on Twitter at RichardSefton3, and I would very much like it for you to say hello or join in the conversation. This podcast aims to think of ways that we can improve our mental health through talking, and that can be a deep and meaningful conversation or a quick natter over the garden fence. You can even be talking to yourself. So go grab yourself a drink, get yourself comfy, and listen, chat along. Like I say, join me on Twitter if you'd like to. For my 30th birthday, I was given a greatest hits album, a best of. It became my favourite album and I had it on all the time, never stopped listening to it and really felt every lyric. That album takes me to what turned out to be quite a difficult period in my life, and it helped me through. That album was by The Feeling. My guest today is one clever man. Not only is he a super talented singer and songwriter for The Feeling, but he has also written for Sophie Ellis-Bextor, TV shows, ballets. He has also written one of the best musicals of modern times. It's an enormous pleasure to welcome the gorgeous Dan Gillespie Sells to my sofa. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Did you like the gushy intro?
It was sufficiently gushy. Thank you very much.
I don't like to gush too much, so you know.
That's why it gets embarrassing after a while. You know, I don't want to go red.
Really? Well, I can't see you. It's audio. It's fine. You go as red as you like.
Safe.
I mean, I haven't even done my hair this morning.
I know. Why do we now? I mean, you know.
I've been.
Well, we're starting to emerge, and suddenly, you know, I'm starting to realise all the pressures of living in the real world, you know, with other people, and suddenly I realised my wardrobe is incredibly tired, and I even got asked to do a kind of TV thing this week, and I turned it down because I was like, I'm just not ready.
Are you joking?
I'm not ready to be seen yet. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to take me a bit to sort my hair out and sort my face out and sort my life out, you know, and figure out what to wear. I'm just not ready yet. You know, it's a weird thing, but I think we're kind of, we're getting to the point where we have to kind of like, okay, step into the real world and prepare ourselves. But that's one of the things that has been, I suppose, a kind of silver lining of the dark cloud of COVID. You know, The silver lining is that we had a little bit of a respite from some of the kind of strain of everyday life. Yeah.
Pajamas have become the new tuxedos, though. So I mean, it's always been the case around Liverpool, which is, like, you know, quite close to me.
Of course.
But, you know, now it's the new thing. How has lockdown been for you then?
Overall, okay, and I'm grateful that I have a studio in my home, so I can work from here, and I'm able to just carry on being kind of productive, carry on being creative. And so I've insulated from some of the nastier side of COVID, which is people feeling very isolated and people feeling very much like they can't do their jobs anymore, and that kind of stuff, particularly in the creative industry. So I've lucked out to a certain degree, but I mean, I've also had ups and downs. You know, I've also had, you know, kind of stressful moments where I've started to kind of, you know, the overall looming stress of the situation does get to everyone, I think. You know, you're lucky if you can avoid that. But day to day, I'm very grateful.
Yeah. I mean, when was the last time you performed with the band?
It's been a really, really long time.
Yeah.
But to be fair, that's not the bit I miss.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not that. I mean, I always say that. I say that kind of half jokingly. You know, I mean, I've been playing with those people, you know, my band, since we were 16, you know, and so it's like, you know, and I'm 42, you know, it's like more than half my life playing with this, but, you know, a year off is fine.
Yeah.
A year off is absolutely fine, you know, and we'll get back into it and I'll love it again. But, you know, I could easily take a year off from playing with the boys and it doesn't bother me at all. You know, it's kind of, actually it's quite a nice rest. You know, we use live work in order to pay for all the other work we want to do. So, you know, it's how we earn our livings. It's how we pay the mortgage. It's how I run the studio. It's how, you know, it supplements the rest of the work that we want to do. And we love it. Not to say we don't love playing live, but we've done it solidly for years, you know, 25 years or something, you know, it's kind of nuts.
That's a long time. You must have really close bonds with them.
Yeah, we have an amazing relationship. You know, the lineup hasn't changed, you know, ever, and we have the same group of people. Somehow we managed to figure each other out really early on.
Yeah.
And since then it's been, just like a family relationship, just like having siblings or something, it's just having siblings you chose, and there are a bunch of musicians that I will always work with. And what's lovely is that, when I started working on, everybody's talking about Jamie, for example, and I needed musicians, they're the ones that I called on. And so even if I'm working on side projects, I bring them in, whoever's appropriate for whatever project, I bring them in and they become part of it, and they become, very much collaborators on all the stuff I do, because they're the best musicians I know, and I trust them, and I have a relationship with them, which is going to be unlike any relationship I'll ever have with another musician, because of 20 years of live work with them. You can't kind of buy that.
Well, it sounds so lovely. That really does sound warm, cozy.
Yeah, it's warm. We have a lot of respect for each other. And we're all odd and very, very different, and we've all got our own tastes, and we've all got our own ideas, and we're not a homogenous blob of people, but we appreciate what each other can bring, and it's not like I always use the same people on everything. Like, there are some projects where I go, okay, that's not one for the boys, that's maybe not one for but maybe Kieran, for example, on keys, he I need him for that project, and then there's other things where I'm like, Paul is the best drummer for this. He's the best drummer I know for this. He's going to come and work on this project, and they asked me to come and help them with their projects on the side as well. So it's like more of a kind of community of artists who have a kind of, we have our own history, and we can bring that to everything we do.
How far back do you remember being artistic? What age sort of did you, I don't know, start singing or pick up an instrument?
I think my memories of it are very vague, because I was probably 4 or 5. I know for a fact that I got my first piano when I was 5.
Wow.
And that was my dad got a piano, then my mum got a piano, because my parents were separated.
Yeah.
Both households had a piano straight away, because I basically demanded it. My dad got a piano from an old pub, which is, he had a mate, and it ended up with, somehow it got swapped for a multi-gym or something, and then we ended up with a piano, which was great, and that sat in our front room, and I've still got that piano to this day, because Really? It's this old honky-tonk piano, and I love the way it sounds. So it's an old kind of tack piano, one of those zingy pianos that you can use on, and they actually, you hear them a lot on great pop records, and particularly in things like ABBA records, you hear them and stuff like that. So
well, when you said from an old pub, I imagined doing the Lambeth Walk and all that.
Exactly. Well, it's one of those old honky tonk. Yeah. It's a very honky sounding piano, and I love it very much. And in fact, it's right next to me now, so I can give you a little. There you go, like the Zingle. That's what it sounds like, and it's kind of a unique tone, but actually it got used a lot in great pop records, particularly in the 70s. You hear that tone on lots of great pop records, so I kind of I use it on loads of stuff. So that's been with me since I was kind of 5. So
Wow.
I know, it's mad, isn't it? Some things you just manage to hang on to. Luckily it was in my dad's house for so many years, and eventually I was like, oh, actually, Dad, can I have the old tack piano please for my studio? I want
my gym. I want my multi-gym back.
I don't know who ended up with the multi-gym, but yeah, there we go.
I wonder what life that piano had before it came to your dad's house. I wonder if it could speak, where would it have been?
Well, the funny thing is, my studio is in a pub.
Okay.
And I wonder whether, I'm sure it wasn't in this pub.
Never know.
It'd be really weird if it ended up kind of being repatriated to the same pub. But
I'm home.
This is an old kind of, I have an old Victorian kind of corner pub. It hadn't been a pub for years, even when I bought it, which was a long time ago. But it used to be a gay bar.
Okay.
And I didn't realise this when I bought it, but I found out a couple of years after having owned it, when my uncle came to visit, and he was out during the 80s.
Really?
And in the early 80s, he used to drink in here. And since then, I've met lots of people of that generation who remember drinking in here and going to see drag artists perform in here. And so it's by complete coincidence, I've ended up, in working and writing and creating songs about, drag artists in a place where drag artists used to perform. It's kind of like, it's all a bit bonkers and meta, but I love it.
It's like, that's like a kind of one of those links that just happens. That's like,
it just happens. I suppose
wow.
it happens in cities, isn't it, as well? That's the great thing about London. It has such a rich and varied history, because it's not just that it was a gay pub in the 80s and 90s. Also during the later 90s, when it wasn't a gay pub, it was also a big West Indian hangout, and that was also where a lot of the community in Hackney here used to have big dominoes competitions and things like that. So it's not just the gay community; it's other communities also will have used this space. And there was Women's Institute meetings in here, and all kinds of other things that used to go on in the past. And I'm sure before it was a gay bar, it was all kinds of things. It might have been a gangster pub, or it might have had a, I love the history of cities, because they're so rich and they're so full of just human stories.
That really intrigues me. The fact that you live in a Victorian pub and it's got that history. I mean, obviously they'd all have history, but the fact that you know so much about it, and that it used to be a gay bar, being from that community, I suppose it's exciting.
It's a nice connection to have with somewhere that you work. I think that's really really amazing. I didn't believe it when I first heard. I was like, nah, it can't be true. And then more and more people came and kind of confirmed it. And they were like, me, I used to drink in there in the late 70s. And I'd be like, oh, wow.
Wow. Can you imagine how different it was there back then? Smashed windows and...
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably had blacked out windows, and it would have been, kind of.
And they still do in a lot of places, don't they?
They do, and we're losing a lot of those queer venues now, and it's important to keep them going.
I remember I used to go to I think it was called the Gloucester in Greenwich. It used to be a gay bar right on the park, and then all of a sudden they put some screens up and put sport on. And all of a sudden, those gays just left.
But you know what's really funny about that? I mean, I sometimes, I go to Greenwich every now and then, and I look at that place, and I think that used to be the Gloucester. It was huge. Mm-hmm. It was prime location right across, and it shows what Greenwich was like back then. Do you know what I mean? For it to be something essentially a countercultural kind of venue, for it to have that prime location right on the park opposite the gates, and do you know what I mean? You think, wow, Greenwich was a different place then. And because queer culture was counterculture. It wasn't part of the mainstream, and London has changed so much because those these kind of niche places will have trouble surviving in these places that are essentially prime location now. And that's why Hackney's lost a lot of its gay bars, because it's prime location for mainstream bars and mainstream life to happen. And so our kind of slightly more countercultural, slightly more niche kind of places are going to struggle to survive. And so we have to kind of support them if we can, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I miss going out. I really do. I didn't go out that much before lockdown, but you'd think I went out every weekend. The amount that I'm missing it. But
it's weird, isn't it? Yeah, I think that we might make a bit more of where we live now that we've had an experience of not having it. And
I hope so.
Yeah, we were spoiled, I think we realise now how spoiled we were, some of us, to live in a place which is vibrant and alive and full of culture and full of things happening and full of choice. And, I mean, I adore London. I don't think I'll ever really live anywhere else. And it's because, for me, it evolves more quickly than you can keep up with it. And that's exciting and thrilling. I don't think I could ever go into one area. You go to an area and you go back 10 minutes later and it's completely changed, and that means you'll never be bored.
I was actually, I've got it written down here to say that, to me, it's quite evident that London means a lot to you, and you just said that. So you're part of the city now, though. You've made your mark. You've got a West End musical, and how does that feel? Was that like a jump in the air, oh my God moment?
No, there was never a moment where I jumped in the air and went, hey, because what happens is in like any industry is that you can't really believe in anything until it's happened. Yeah. Because we work in an industry which is so fickle and so flaky, and also you get promised a million things in our business. And you get that woo moment, and then it falls through. And I'm afraid I've been burned so many times over the years with things that almost happened, that I don't really kind of allow myself to enjoy it until it's happened. And then when it happens, you go, oh wow, it happened. But it's almost like it's done, you know, like there's a kind of, there's, you know, and with everything I've ever done, there's been, you know, delays, and there's been that thing where you kind of thought it was going to be like this and then it turned out like that. And then, you know, so when it actually finally does happen, you almost disbelieve it, and you almost have to kind of, you know, kind of go back, and then, and now I kind of can appreciate that I've had my name up on a sign in the West End for, you know, 3 years, you know, and I go, wow, you know, we're 1,000 shows in, and I've, you know, and I'm only just starting to kind of let it settle in. I'm starting to believe it and start to kind of enjoy it.
Oh,
And also, you're also very busy when these things happen. So, I mean, someone once says to me, the first time you ever played at Wembley or something like that, you know, what was it like? And I was like, well, I was busy. I was busy warming up my voice, making sure I had a good performance to do, tuning my guitar, making sure that everything was going to be perfect, making sure I looked all right, walking out on stage, doing the performance. By the time I came off, I didn't really have a lot of time to take it in. And I think that often happens, you know, when we're rehearsing a show and it's about to go live in the West End for the first time. You literally got so much to think about that it gets quite difficult to actually kind of soak it up and take it in. You know, you're just kind of more worried about the technical detail of it all being right. You know, it's just a job, you know, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I'm getting better at learning to soak it up and really take it in.
I've heard people like the Spice Girls or Take That say things like it's better the second time around because we know how to appreciate it more and appreciate it being in the moment. So that's what that reminds me of, what you're saying there.
I think you learn over time to savor the moments, and you know, and everyone will always tell you, you know, at the time, you know, really enjoy this, but it's really hard to do that if it's the first time you've done something, because you're really scared. You know, you're really scared. You've got a million things on your mind, and you're self-conscious, and all of that stuff that comes with youth. So yeah, it you know, I mean, I feel very grateful actually that my band didn't become successful until we'd been together like nearly 10 years. And, you know, we were in our mid-20s, which for the music industry is quite late to be successful. So, you know, we were already fairly long in the tooth by the time The Feeling took off. And we'd also been working as session players, and we'd been behind the scenes in the music industry long enough. We'd played on other people's albums, and we'd supported people on TV shows, and so we knew what we were going into. But even then, it's still overwhelming when you're in it. You know, even then it was still overwhelming. I'm just very grateful that it didn't happen when I was 18 or 19, because I think it would have been a complete blur, you know.
Yeah, I do. You know, now I'm the age that I am, and you being the age you are, if you look back to people like that are 16, 15, you know, 17, whatever, and you just think, wow, to be that age and be like, I don't know, world famous like Britney Spears or something like that.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're emotionally and intellectually fully kind of, you know, fully grown until you're in your early 20s, and that you know, neurologists will tell you this. You know, they'll tell you that there's still parts of your brain completely evolving. I mean, our brains never stop evolving, but there, you know, there's whole big developments that happen neurologically in your early 20s. And so, you know, nobody's really fully an adult until they've, you know, they've reached their mid-20s, you know, and even then,
delayed.
I know, I think I'm still getting there myself, but you know, it's terrifying to think that you know, you could be put on such a pedestal at such a young age. But some people manage it beautifully, and some people, I think for everyone, it leaves a certain, it leaves something behind that's never going to be the same again. You know, like any experience in life, but that's particularly odd and life-changing experience. It's troubling, and I suppose it's troubling because you haven't seen enough of the world to realise that you're not special. And you haven't seen enough of the world to realise that there are so many people out there working incredibly hard, and way harder than you will ever work, who will never see anything like the kind of success and the kind of grandeur and the whatever that you get. And so, you know, I often see people saying things like, yeah, I mean, I'm really grateful for what I've got. I've worked really hard for this. And I go, did you? I mean, work as hard as someone on the NHS? Did you work as hard as, how hard did you really work? I mean, I'm sure you worked hard. I'm sure you
Yeah.
worked really hard. Nobody's successful in the music industry or in any industry without working hard, particularly in showbiz. It's a tough game. But there's always someone worked harder with less to show for it. Always, always, always. So just beware. I think it's people just have to be, and you're not aware of that when you're young. And you can't really feel that when you're young. You haven't seen it.
No.
So I do think that it does screw with your head.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it would. It's just like I would say, yeah, like you said, mid-20s. You've experienced things. You have, like you said, you've realised that that you're not as special as maybe you'd like to think.
Yeah, you've had your first few big knockbacks in life. You've had that first big rejection. You've had that. You need to have all that, I think.
And you've been able to do things, I suppose, that if you were recognised at the age of 16, 15, 16, you wouldn't necessarily be able to go and buy yourself a Big Mac in McDonald's, or whereas I suppose mid-20s you would have done things like that. Or
I think, well, I mean, it all depends. No, I think it all depends on what kind of artist you want to become as well. I mean, I'm very grateful that I never became famous enough to not get the bus. And I'm grateful that I feel like I can still tell ordinary people's stories in what I do. Yeah. Because I know ordinary people and I live a fairly ordinary life. I wouldn't say I live a entirely ordinary life. I mean, what is ordinary? But I think I have a community that I live in Hackney where I walk down the street, I walk the dog every day, I see people, I go to Tesco's. It's fairly mundane. It's fairly dull. I like getting the bus into town, but I cycle a lot. And I know the people in the local cafe, pretty well, and and my life is fairly unbothered by fame or notoriety or status, fairly much so. I'd say not always. Depends where I am, but most of the time, and so I feel like a connection to at least that community. So I can at least feel like I can write about people in that community in an honest, truthful way, in a way that I truly understand. And I'm genuinely interested in all kinds of people. So it's nice to be able to mix with all kinds of people and be part of their community, so that I can feel like I can talk about it and be part of it and and write about it, because I'm in the world of storytelling now much more than I was with just doing pop music. I write musicals now, so it's it's nice to feel like I've got a connection to the places I'm writing about.
You said in an interview actually that music that you write for the musical isn't the sort of music that you would listen to whilst picking the kids up. And okay, I don't have kids. I love kids. I don't have kids. I listen to And You Don't Even Know It all the time in the car. I think it's an amazing track to drive to.
Well, I think the context in which I was saying that was that in the theatre, the songs have to do a little bit more work, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Land straight away.
Because the audience is sat and focused and in the middle of a story. So you've got to kind of carry the storytelling on through the song a little bit, or you've got to keep the song moving, so you've got to have slightly more variation than you do on radio. And what really works on radio is repetition. So if you were to just put a radio song in the theatre, people would be like, okay, I've got this now, I'm ahead of you, and I'm slightly bored. So what you do is you kind of vary it a little bit more. You put slightly more variation into the song as it goes along. The lyric isn't the same lyric repeated in every chorus. You kind of use the main hook, but then you shift the lyric a bit more. In a pop song, you have exactly the same lyric in most choruses. You just repeat it. And so there's a difference in the what. But I do think musical theatre songs work really well while you're picking the kids up from school as well, because though they are moving really quickly and there's more stuff in them, people can handle that, and as long as you've written a strong enough melody and a strong enough hook, then it still makes sense on the radio. I just think that if you were to try and do a regular straight up pop song in a musical theatre show and not give it the kind of extra stuff that it needs, the audience would be ahead of it in no time, and they would go, can we get back to the story now, please? I've heard this chorus 3 times and I'm a bit bored. So that was just one of the things I noticed was different for me. It's an adjustment I had to make, when I was writing for theatre, I noticed that actually I couldn't do my normal songwriting thing, which was pretty much, verse, chorus, verse, chorus, middle eight, chorus, 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 end.
Yeah.
I couldn't get away with the simplicity of a pop song. However, I did want the hookiness, and I wanted the tone, and I wanted the kind of immediacy of pop music to be part of the storytelling in Jamie when I was writing that.
Yeah. I mean, that comes across, and it also, I think, it goes well because of the age of the cast, and
Yeah, they're a young cast and they're a working class community as well. That's the other thing, is if I made it sound like Sondheim, I just think it wouldn't speak to those people, and it would be weird, and if I made it sound like a kind of like slightly more in inverted commas higher art form, like some musical theatre is, it wouldn't speak to that community. And we wrote that piece not only about that community but for that community. It was put on in Sheffield at the Crucible Theatre, which has an amazing outreach program and gets lots and lots of people who've never been to the theatre through the doors. And one of the reasons we wrote that piece was we wanted people from that particular community to come and see theatre and feel like they had a part of it and feel like their stories were being told. So it was a big part of what made us want to do it in the first place and why we set it in Sheffield.
Is the real guy called Jamie New?
No, the real guy's called Jamie Campbell.
Oh.
And one of the other reasons the reason that we named him Jamie New was that during the process well, it rhymes with more things. No, Campbell is great. You've got Amble, and there's lots of half rhymes for Campbell. Don't worry. But when we were writing it, part of the process of writing for us was to not be too wedded to the original documentary on which the show was inspired by. The show was inspired by a documentary, but we didn't want to slavishly stick to every detail of the documentary. We wanted to create new stuff, and the documentary was only a 45-minute documentary, which had, they couldn't shoot in the school, and there was lots of stuff we wanted to include. So we knew we had to make a load of stuff up. So during the process, we didn't include Jamie or Margaret, his mum, in the process. And what we did was we changed the name, we changed the city it was set in, and we changed it enough so that we could say, okay, Jamie, this is as much of your story as you are willing to claim. Because I think we didn't want to feel like he was stuck with this story that he might not have wanted to lay claim to. And actually, as it turns out, he was like, oh, well, how did you guess that all of this stuff was like my life? And wow. he claimed it completely once we'd done it, and he only saw it when it was basically finished. So and him and his mother both, who are, his mother's a big part of the story. Him and Margaret, They claimed it completely, but we gave them the option to not claim it, and we changed the name so that we felt like it was really important for him to be able to say, actually, this is loosely based on my story, but it's not my story, if he felt like he needed to do that. And then that gave us a lot of license to be free and not worry about it being wedded to a particular person. However, he knows he's the inspiration of the story, and so much of the story is so universal and so part of lots of people's experience that it's not just Jamie who feels like we've told his story, it's all the other Jamies out there, you know.
And Jamie, sort of to encapsulate the whole LGBTQ community as a whole, or little boys that might want to wear a dress.
Yeah, it's about, and it's more than even about LGBT stuff as well. It's about community as a, it's about the odd kid who is just authentically odd or different, authentically doesn't fit in, in a way that they're just so them that there's no way they're going to pretend to be anything else. And actually what happens in that world with those kids is that everyone around them has to shift. It's not Jamie that has to go through the big. It's not Jamie that has to go on the big journey, which is traditional for storytelling. Is that you have a hero and the hero goes on a journey. For us, it's like we have a hero and everyone around the hero goes on the emotional journey.
Exactly, that's what I liked about it. That's why it must have been really emotional for him and his mum the first time they saw it. Even though, like you say, loosely based. But he said, "How did you guess?"
Yeah.
Oh, wow, that must have been an amazing moment for you as well.
Well, the first thing we did was play him the songs. We took him to the studio, my studio here, and he came to visit, and he listened to the songs, and yeah, he was in bits.
Oh,
And I
God.
think that he was a bit like, how did you know? But we know because we're all Jamies,
Uh,
me, Tom,
yeah.
and Jonathan, the creators of the show. We're so much of Jamie and us. There's so much of we put so much of ourselves into it. We know what it was like to be, you know, odd at school, not just because we're gay, but also because we're just odd. We're just different. We're just creative, and we just see things slightly differently to all the other kids, and we wanted to put ourselves into the story. We just connected with it, which is why we wanted to tell the story. I don't think you can tell a story unless you understand the characters, and we understood Jamie from when we saw that documentary, and that was the onus of creating the piece in the first place, is because we were like, okay, we can tell, we know who this kid is, and we can tell this kid's story really well.
And you did. I promise you, you
Oh,
did.
thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
No, it's amazing. I mean, I was crying. The mum sings her solo, and I was
Yeah.
thinking of like you do sometimes. Think about yourself, and I was thinking about the little boy that grew up and wanted to play with girls' toys,
Yeah.
but had to keep it a secret because somehow, even at that age, I knew that it was wrong and frowned upon.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that to me, that I suppose everyone will take different things out of it. How you say you were different at school? How was school for you?
It was a bit crap. I mean, it's a lot worse for a lot of other people, I think, but it was a bit crap because it was a bog standard state school, and I wouldn't say that it was a bad school at all because it was a perfectly good, and actually now it's a great school. But when I was going there, it was state schools in the 80s and 90s
Mm,
were full of homophobia,
yeah.
only because culturally is that thing where you can't, at home, obviously I never experienced homophobia because I was raised by lesbians.
Hmm.
But when I was at school, the homophobic attitudes were rife, and so I'm stuck in a culture where, I'm forced to hide who I am, or at least kind of tone down who I am.
Yeah.
And at an age when I should be allowed to develop into the adult I'm going to become without shame and without fear.
Mm,
So, it's no different from anyone else's experience, particularly in them days. We also had Section 28
hmm.
on the statute books, which meant that the teachers, even if they wanted to intervene, couldn't really say very much, and they couldn't really do much about the culture in the school.
Yeah.
Because if they were to outwardly talk about homosexual issues in the school, they were at risk of breaking the law.
Mm,
And that's what that law did. That law created a culture in schools of shame, and that's because teachers had to just keep stum about things that they should have been able to talk about. And if you knew there was a teacher who was obviously gay, and they weren't allowed to talk about it, and that just was a display of something that they need to be ashamed of. What that said to the kid was, there's something wrong with being gay, and
yeah.
so it's hugely harmful for a whole generation of kids. And I'm one of the lucky ones because I was raised in a very, gay positive household. So even before I knew I was gay or anything, I knew that it was okay if I was.
Yeah.
And I'm a one in a million because I'm incredibly lucky to have been raised at that time with those attitudes around me. My uncle was openly gay, my mum was gay, she had a partner, and we were part of the community.
Hmm.
And so for me, I was super lucky, but I still had to go to a crappy school with crappy ideas and stupid ideas that were being, spouted by other kids who brought that bile into school by their parents.
Mm,
Because their parents would say stupid things, and that they'd come in and repeat it and regurgitate it, and then before you know it, the kids are all regurgitating all this poisonous nonsense,
mm.
and you've got to deal with it, and you've got to take that on the chin and live with it until you go home, and then you can let your hair down again. And that's that's the best case scenario in them
Yeah.
days, because
Well,
the worst
yeah.
case scenario is people go home and they have to hide who they are at home as well.
Exactly. I mean, what age did you know that you were gay then?
um 7 or 8, I think.
See, I didn't know until I was 17.
Well, I think I knew what it was. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a very early developer as well. I was like puberty at 9,
Oh,
So
really? See, I
yeah, I
was
was
really
very
late in that department as well. So
no, I was very early to start. I was having hormonal urges very early on, and I think I fancied people around 7 or 8 years old. I started actually fancying boys, if you know what I mean. So then I knew, I kind of knew, and I didn't really kind of want to confirm anything until I was older. And actually, it got to the point where I didn't really date. I wasn't really in a particularly good place to date, really. But I didn't date until I was kind of 18 or something. And at that age, it was only really then that I felt like I should come out, even though I know I totally could have come out before. But what's embarrassing when you've got parents who are really kind of positive and forthcoming about it is they were constantly asking me, when are you going to come out? When are you going to come out? Are you gay? Are you gay? Are you this? Are you that? Are you going to come out? Are you not going to come out? What's going on? I just didn't want to talk about essentially my fantasies with my, because that's all it was. At that stage, it was like, all it was like, what do I wank about? That's all it was. And I'm like, I'm not actually, I don't have a boyfriend, I don't have a partner, I have absolutely nothing going on. So really, it felt like, can't you just wait until I've got someone to talk about?
That's quite. I've never thought of it that way, but it's quite.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It's weird
You
to
want
get into
to know
conversation
who I'm
with
thinking of when I'm wanking.
Right, exactly. It's weird to get into a conversation about your fantasies with your parents. I didn't want to because it was only fantasy land anyway.
Yeah.
But I think if you have homophobic parents and it's a political stance, then it's different. I think if you've got parents who you had to stand up against and go, actually, well, I'm gay and it means all these things because I'm actually, I'm actually rebelling. I'm actually doing, and actually in my head, I'm not going to have your thought police kind of thing. I could totally get why coming out to your parents, even though you've not even got a partner, that means a lot. If you have homophobic parents or you have parents that that might be homophobic, you need to know how they feel about it. You need to know how they're going to feel about it when you do have a partner. That's all really important. But for me, I knew exactly I knew they were going to be cool about it, and I knew they were just going to start asking about boyfriends, and I knew that all I was really saying was, this is what I wank about. And I was not willing to have that conversation with my parents, so I didn't come out for ages. But it was a different reason for not coming out. It was a weird kind of self-conscious thing about me just going, like, can I just wait till I've got a boyfriend, please?
No, I get that. I've never heard that before, but I get it.
Well, because very few people are in that situation. Like I say, very few people.
I suppose I was a bit the opposite. I didn't come out until I was 17. I didn't come out to myself until I was 17. But I'd already had lots of sex with men and women. Yeah. But I didn't realise until I met my first partner that I fancied guys, because before it was just like casual this or casual that, or experimenting.
Just what you were doing.
Yeah. It wasn't until I met my first partner and I thought, oh, I actually fancy a man.
Right.
It clicked. And I was 17, that's old. I mean, you hear kids these days coming out at 13, 12, and I think it's amazing. And also, the most popular kid in school is the gay kid and stuff like that. And I hear it and I think, amazing, we are moving in the right direction.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I sometimes go and visit the Brit School, which has got this amazing kind of pride event every year, and all the kids get involved, and
You're
it's
joking,
so supportive.
That's brilliant.
And when we did Jamie, we decided we were going to go and visit lots of schools in that community because I'm not from Sheffield. Jonathan, our director, is from Sheffield, and Tom is not from Sheffield as well. So we went round and did a lot of kind of research and workshops in local schools, state schools in Sheffield. And it was really important for us to kind of make sure that we knew what was going on with kids now. Mm-hmm. And actually, depending on what school it was like night and day. Because some schools were incredibly progressive and had really, really great anti-bullying stuff going on, and were really got it down in the way that they were policing the culture of the school and the kids and what was acceptable, and then other schools were just really struggling. Other schools were just really struggling just to get by, and some schools were really tough environments for all the kids, but particularly for the LGBT kids. And I feel that it's a very mixed picture across the country, depending on socioeconomic circumstances often. Of whichever communities you go into. So as we went and visited all these different schools in the Sheffield area, we got a very mixed picture of what's really going on, actually.
Yeah, but then you get the Brit School that does a Pride event. Wow,
Yeah, and lots of schools do. Lots of schools do. So yeah, I
Really?
mean, God, compared to Section 28 days,
Exactly.
things are definitely moved on. I mean, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah, gay people
That's a
didn't
long time
exist
ago.
in my day.
I mean, that's the thing I do feel grateful for. Having been raised in a gay family, one of the big things is just knowing that what you were was a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
essentially that was a thing and it was okay. That's the biggest thing that I say my parents could ever have done for me, was to let me know that if I was gay, that was legitimate, it was acceptable, and actually it was something which held a future for me.
Did you have
When
any
we'd had all of that
guilt?
messaging about before that about HIV,
Yeah.
and lots of people who felt like that a future for a gay person was a future of tragedy.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm. Yeah, well,
it
one of
was
my
going to
other
be tragic.
podcasts was with a guy called Mark Ward, who was effectively given AIDS through contaminated blood.
Yeah,
And at the age of 14, I think, 13, 14, and he had to
right.
endure horrible things through school. I mean, they called him Freddie Mercury,
Yeah,
which might seem like nothing to some people, but to somebody that's being told on a, I don't know, monthly basis, you haven't got long left to live. He's now in his late 40s. I think he's just turned into his 50s, actually.
wow.
But there wasn't a year that's gone by that he hasn't been told, you're going to die this year. And
Yeah,
and mainly always connected with his sexuality. You're going to
yeah,
die because you're gay, almost.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's horrific to hear. But then, did you ever feel any guilt coming out, or guilt being gay because your parents were gay? Do I
Um,
need to explain that? Because in my head,
well,
because
no, I tell you what. I tell you what. I did feel. There was only one point in which I ever wanted to be straight,
mhm,
and that was when there was a lot of narrative around gay parenting at the time,
this is what I
and
meant.
because
Mm,
gay marriage was being talked about, early days of gay marriage being talked about, and gay families, and Section 28 was very much about gay families. It was about the idea of Section 28 refers to as a pretend family,
mm,
and my family was supposedly a pretend family,
it's
and so there was a lot of discussion at the time around whether what was going to happen was we were going to have this tsunami, an epidemic of gay kids,
mhm.
because the parents being gay was going to mean that the kids were gay. And it was the only time in my life that I was a bit like, God, if I was straight, it would be great because it would prove that wrong.
That's what I was asking about. That's what I thought. Did you have any sort of, oh God, I can't come out because then it'll prove all of them homophobes, right?
Well, yes, I did have that. I had that. I was self-conscious about that, which is a ridiculous thing to be self-conscious, but I was. I was
Mm,
self-conscious about going, oh, that's going to prove the homophobes right, and and of course I knew it wasn't right because I got two brothers who were both straight and they were
yeah.
both raised the same way I was,
Mhm.
So I knew that it was, I knew that was a load of nonsense, but it's still, there was a certain pressure on me to explain to people that though I am gay and I was raised by gay people, they didn't make me gay. you
That's
know
that's quite heartbreaking to hear.
Well,
Um,
because also, a lot of, as soon as you think logically for a second, you would
yeah,
realise that was a complete nonsense. Because what about all the straight parents throughout history who have all had gay kids?
gay kids,
It's
exactly.
gay kids come from straight parents
Hmm.
generally.
Yeah,
It's not. It's not
yeah, but
that.
the rational and irrational are taken out of it. A, when you're a teenager.
Yeah,
B, when you're scared.
yeah,
C,
yeah.
when you've got the whole of society shouting at you that something should be one way when you know it's the other way.
Yeah, and when
It's
you're dealing with bigots as well, that's the
yeah.
other thing, is you're dealing with people that don't really think rationally and talk rationally, and the argument gets all skewed into a place where there's there's very little logic involved. It's just opinion and all that kind of stuff. And it, uh, overall though, that was the least of my worries about being gay. It was, HIV was still rife, and we were still part of the HIV epidemic. It was still very much
Yeah.
happening in London where I was growing up. We knew lots of people. My uncle lost a partner.
Oh,
We lost family, friends left, right, and centre during that period, and right into the 90s we were still losing people.
God, so you had
And
that as a reminder all the time. I mean, I knew it
I
was
knew it was
going
around
on.
me because we were part of the community.
Yeah.
We were. I was going to Pride March every year. I had my mum's a lesbian and I love her banner that
Mm.
I was waving around every single year. And I was
I
I
love
was
that.
I was there, and I was performing at Pride as soon as I could perform. When I was like 15, 16, I started playing gigs at Pride. I'd play in the women's tent. You know, it was so weird. You know, Dad had Clapham Common. You know, it was. You know, I was very much part of the you know, our whole family was part of the community in a way, actually, in a way that I very much miss now, because I don't feel that we have quite the same sense of community, and that's probably a good thing, because we don't have the need for it, the necessity for it. That solidarity isn't quite as strong as it used to be, because we're not as under attack as we were. But as a whole, you know, but I miss that sense of community, and closeness, and the real diversity within that. You know, there was the Black Lesbian Women's Group, there was disabled people with, you know, there was an organisation called Regard, which was run by my mother, which was a LGBT disability organisation, and so there was huge diversity, and there was lots and lots of people coming together to fight Section 28, for example, or to get an equal age of consent, or whatever things that were on the statute books that we had to fight at that particular time. It brought us together, and I was raised in a community in the same way that they say it takes a village to raise a child. I was raised in a gay village, and I loved it. You know, I loved it very much. My brothers will both tell you that it was fantastic for them as straight boys. They will tell you that it was equally.
Well, no one hates a sense of community, I suppose, do they?
Yeah, and I think that it kind of it kept us feeling safe. It kept us feeling, you know, that we were part of something, and part of something moving forward. And
it sounds beautiful. It really does.
I have great memories, very fond memories of my childhood. You know.
Yeah, we were my band was booked to play Pride last year. And look what happened there.
Oh.
But hey-ho, dear. Onwards and upwards, maybe this year.
Yeah, and who knows what's going to become of Pride? You know, Pride's been a mess for years. You know, Pride's been corporatized, and you know, we haven't found the right balance with Pride, between community and between, you know, corporate outreach and all of those things, and how we're going to fund it, and how we're going to do. And I do wish we were a little bit more radical with Pride. I feel like if we were to turn around and say these streets are our streets and we're taking them, I don't think we need to be quite as heavily policed and quite as heavily kind of cordoned off and organised and wristbanded. You know, you don't get that you know, that kind of. It doesn't feel like we've pushed back enough, actually. In the same way that, you know, I've seen Notting Hill Carnival be kind of under threat so many times, but they have pushed back, and that community has pushed back, and they have said, no, we are doing this. This is our community. This is our community doing our thing, and they've worked with the police, and but they've not rolled over in the same way that I feel like Pride has just rolled over so many times to, you know, kind of become sanitized and corporatized. And I think that we need to reclaim it a little bit, and we need to turn it into something which still has some kind of relevance in real working people's lives.
I suppose it's hard when you get people in the community, and I was one of them 4 years ago, that didn't understand the need for every label and the letters being extended, LGBTQI, and then going on. And I was one of those people just a few years ago that that wouldn't have understood the black lesbian group that you said, or the disabled lesbian group. I would have thought we're just all people. So I joined an LGBTQ plus choir to try and understand more. And I spoke to some of the older members, and I got it, and I understood it, and I now understand it. And well, I suppose it's human nature that we tribe. We need tribes. This is my tribe.
Yeah, we've got a tribe, and the tribe having that big long list of letters, though kind of like somehow some people find it slightly ridiculous. I think what it does is it says that it does a wonderful thing in that it says we are all together because we're clumping these letters together out of solidarity, but also we hold on to our own identities within that. And that's the perfect thing. That's the perfect kind of devolution that we need. You know, we need to be able to feel like we have some agency in our own lives and some kind of sense of community at the same time. And so we want to be part of a community. We want to become a homogenous blob. You know, we want to be a salad, not a soup. You know, I don't know how many analogies you can come up with, but you know what I mean? Like
I love your homogenous blob one.
Well, you know, because it's so easy just to
have
feel
you seen
like
my lockdown stomach?
I haven't, but you know what? You've worked hard to get that stomach. You know, so
Cost
just
me a lot.
keep feeding it. It's you know what? It's important. I think identity is a double-edged sword, because you know we need identity big time, because we need to, because they use identity to attack us, and so we use identity to defend ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
They use names in order to other us, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to claim those names and those definitions in order to stand up for ourselves and find our brothers and sisters and siblings who we can stand alongside in order to push back, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a double-edged sword, though, because what happens is, at the same time as attaching ourselves to what used to be, I suppose, adjectives, we've turned them into kind of nouns, and we've kind of made them like I am a, you know, and then suddenly we can feel a little bit restricted by that, and we can feel that they're a bit rigid, and we can feel that we're boxed in by them, and we can feel that they maybe say more about us than we want them to say. So we have to be really careful to make sure that they are just adjectives, but they are also something that is important to recognize, but not be super wedded to, because we are humans who change, and humans evolve, and humans shift, and are complex and are layered, and we have more to us, and we all contain multitudes, and we should all be able to understand the complexity of what it is to be a human being. It's why I love storytelling. It's why I love, you know, telling stories about people, because you can include such complexity in good storytelling. You know, you tell the story of a complex, you know, songwriting is all about that. Songs are crap if they're just about one thing on one layer. Songs are great. Songs are great. Yeah, songs are great because they're about all kinds of things. You know, they you know, you take a simple idea, but you bring nuance, and you bring, you know, within 3 minutes, the music can, you know, convey complex emotion. You know,
your songwriting is amazing. I love absolutely love your song. Who are your influences musically?
They're all over the place. I've got to say, they're all over the place. You know, I mean, great songwriters like Elton and Bernie. I think Bernie Taupin is one of the greatest lyricists of all time. He's probably my favourite lyricist, Bernie, because there's something poetic but not too poetic, and there's something just kind of you know, transporting about his lyrics. You know, they kind of transport you to a place, but it's not too well defined a place. It's a kind of slightly kind of it's a beautiful faint picture that's painted that you can put yourself into. And then there's also all the great storytellers through history, through music, like Harold Arlen and Cole Porter and Irving Berlin, and you know, all of the great kind of songwriters of the American tradition. And then I also love the Carpenters, and I love, you know, ABBA, and I love the big shiny pop songs of ELO, and I love you know, and I love the Who, and I love the Stones, I love the Beatles. Obviously, who doesn't love the Beatles? You can't kind of mention the Beatles as a British pop singer without thinking, wow, how did that happen? You know,
so everyone the world.
Then. Just everyone except for the rubbish people, really, yeah.
Sorry, cheeky girls.
I quite like the cheeky girls. I wasn't referring to the cheeky girls, but I'm not going to tell you who I was referring to.
Later, once I've pressed off, record. That's for the part 2. So your influences are kind of all over the place and well-rounded.
Well, I use different influences for different things that I'm doing. You know, doing different projects, different films, or different TV shows, or different whatever. You know, because I'm working on 6 or 7 different musicals at the moment, and they all. I mean, all various different stages of completion. But sometimes,
bloody hell, 6 or 7.
Well, yeah, I mean that sounds like a lot, but actually, some of them I'm literally only just starting, and some of them I wrote over lockdown, and some of them I finished over lockdown, and a couple of them were finished a while ago, and they're just waiting to see the light of day, and that's our industry. And some of them will never get finished, and a couple of them will maybe never see the light of day, and that's fine. You know, as artists, we get used to rejection, so what we do is we carry on creating, and some days I'm writing. Some days I like to reference country music, and other days it feels like I want to reference something a bit more like 19 20s French music or something, and I'll listen to some of that stuff, and I'll get into that world, because that's something that, there's something about the post-war Paris, that I think of Jacques Brel or something, and I go, actually I want to have bring a bit of Jacques Brel into what I'm doing here, or yeah, there's such an amazing amount of music out there to learn from and to glean from, that I don't restrict myself. I think when you're a pop artist and when you're starting out, it's quite useful to have quite a narrow vision, because that's how you create your sound, and you want to head in one direction quite cleanly when you're young. And I think about being a teenager and being a kind of musician, what you hate, and you know that you don't want to do that, and you don't want to do that, and you're quite narrow in what you want to do, and that's really useful as an artist to create your voice. That's a really useful thing. And then I think as you get older as an artist, and it becomes more about the craft of what you do, I think you broaden your horizons. And I think I'm in my 40s now, and I'm willing to listen to anything and take something from everything, because I don't need to define my sound anymore.
Oh, your career has certainly evolved, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for it, because if I was still trying to, I don't know, get played on Radio 1, it's that is it's a kind of young person's game, I think, and I don't feel like I need to. I don't really want to spend a lot of time thinking about production, or what the latest production is, or the latest kind of hooks people are using, or the latest kind of lyrical fad. That is something for young people who get excited by that to do. I am interested in what I've got to say, or what my characters have got to say, and how best I can tell that bit of story. And with the New Feeling album, which I've just been working on, just pretty much finished now, I've reached a philosophical place where I've got different things to say than I used to have to say, so I'm going to say what I want to say.
So songwriting's good for your mental health then?
Oh God, 100%. I don't know where I'd be without it. I mean, it's hard for me to tell, because I've been writing songs since I was a kid, so I don't know how I would have developed if it wasn't for having songwriting as a kind of outlet. I think it's quite a leveling thing for me. I don't have big ups and downs in my life very much. I tend to stay on a fairly even keel, and I think that's just because I write songs every day. It's kind of
amazing way of living, I suppose. But like you say, you wouldn't know any different. But
yeah, I wouldn't know any different, really. I mean, I have had times where I've times where I haven't been as creative, and I think they're the times when I did feel less well mentally, I think. But as long as I've got a piano nearby and or a guitar or something, then I'm normally okay.
I do think that I mean, a guitar's quite portable, a piano not so much, but but I do feel that as a society, as people, we do need to be we do need to notice and realize when we're not feeding our souls as much. And that for you, I suppose, would be songwriting. For somebody else, it might be reading. And I don't feel as people we give ourselves enough time anymore. A few of us do, but not enough. And that's when anxiety and depression and things creep in.
Well, I think it's really interesting that they've taken a lot of the creative arts out of the curriculum. This is what Gove did. When the Tories got into power and stripped arts away from the curriculum, and they turned it into this kind of very vocational kind of cold, hard scientific kind of place to be. I think that what they did was they caused a whole generation of people, and I'm not talking about the wealthy people, I'm talking about the people without means. I'm talking about the more deprived communities who won't have a piano in the parlour. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking about the people who don't have the extracurricular classes to
won't have
fall
a parlour.
back on. They won't have a parlour, and they won't have mummy's bought me piano lessons, whatever. They won't have that, right? So they will have lost what I think is a lot of people's access to joy, which is expression. And they won't have been taught that actually, because all that needs to happen is a kid needs to be taught that actually, you know what, you've got something to say, and you can say it in all these different ways. Whether that's expressing yourself through fashion, or expressing yourself through drawing or painting or art or dance or singing or whatever it is. If someone's got that outlet, that way of accessing their joy and then sharing their joy, which is what part of joy is sharing, if they've got that themselves, then they're going to be set up for the rest of their lives, and through the hard times and the difficult times, they're going to have something to fall back on. But you strip that away from a whole generation of kids, you've got a mental health epidemic on your doorstep. And that's what we're starting to see now, a mental health epidemic, particularly amongst young boys who basically don't have any of those outlets. All they've got is pressure, and this idea of status, that they've got to live up to some kind of status. Buy stuff, be a consumer. And what they're not getting is this idea that art is something which they can create for themselves. It's not something you buy online. It's going on Spotify and listening to the latest Ed Sheeran isn't the same as creating your own art and culture. And I think that culture needs to be more democratized. I think it needs to be something, I think it's really weird actually that we've industrialized our culture to the point where people just get their music from Rihanna. And I'm like, great, I love Rihanna, but I'm not saying, but we should be able to create our own. Shouldn't we be doing our own music and telling our own stories? I'm saying that as a musician who sells their music to other people. I'm just saying that also people should also have the means to express themselves. Every single person should. Every single person should, no matter what your job is, no matter where you're from. The idea that people say, I'm not a creative, so I just don't do that. I think that's crazy. I think everyone's creative. Absolutely. Your outlet might be cooking. You might be making great recipes, or it might be, you're really good at making cocktails. I don't know, but everyone's got to have a kind of creative bit. It might be whittling spoons or making furniture or fixing old things. But people need to have some kind of an outlet, and I don't think it needs to be super highbrow. It can be the ukulele club, but I think if people don't have those outlets and don't have access to those outlets, then they get sick. And I think we have a whole culture and whole communities getting really sick because they don't have those means to kind of creation, and those means to creation are a way of accessing joy. And if you don't have joy in your life, what's the point in getting up in the morning? And you ain't going to get joy by going online and buying crap online and having the latest this and the latest that. That isn't going to bring you joy. That'll bring you some pleasure for a minute, but that's not the same as true joy. True joy is something which is created and shared and received, and I think that that's very different from something you buy. And so I'm really interested in the idea of how we can democratize culture so that everyone feels they have that access to joy and they don't have to buy it. They can just get it. They can just create it. They can just conjure it like a magic trick, and then they can share it within their communities. I'm not interested in the latest big global this or the latest big global that. I'm interested in what happens in communities.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, yeah, who was I talking to not long ago, and they said about societies, the oldest people in society, they always have an amazing sense of community that seems to run through people that get to a certain hell of an age. The oldest people in the world, they've all had this sense of community and helping each other to achieve your best. And it would be, like when I was growing up and I'd say, I want to be a singer or I want to be an actor, I'd always have I don't get me wrong, my family were amazing in lots of ways, but I'd always have what are you really going to do?
What's the real job here?
What's the real job? Have that as a back burner.
And not everyone has to be a professional this or a professional,
No, but it kind of pulls it down. It kind of pushes it down, and you think, okay, so that's a class thing as much as anything else, because I do think that I remember what it was like at my school. I knew I wanted to be a musician from day dot, and I remember teachers trying to kind of tell my parents, this is all very well, but we're still going to have to, this is all very well that Daniel wants to be a musician, but really he needs to do his maths and he needs to do his stuff, because in the real world he's not going to be a musician. And they didn't listen, but thank goodness. But that was because
it wasn't the community I grew up in didn't create musicians. That just wasn't, in in Southgate there weren't that many people becoming musicians, and that was just seen, but because all the musicians came from posher places and were going to go to the Royal Academy, or they were going to, it was a more of a middle class thing, and I wasn't part of that community, and I think that there are very low aspirations for people in working class communities generally. Yeah. Not that it was a kind of lower, I'd say lower middle class where I grew up rather than working class, but that it was unaspirational. I can tell you that much.
Takes a lot out. Songwriting, living in the city, or they're all part of you. The being a gay man, the inspirational parents that you had. It's all part of you. What's next for you?
Well, we are waiting to hear on a release date for the Jamie movie, which is
I wanted to ask about
the next bit. So so everybody's talking about Jamie was adapted into a movie, big movie, and we are waiting on seeing when and how and in which format it's going to get released, because obviously everything's still up in the air, and we don't know what cinemas are going to be doing, and we don't know whether. Because it's kind of in the hands of Fox at the moment, or was Fox, 20th Century Fox, which is now Disney 20th Century, and so it's very much in the hands of them, and we're just going to see what happens. So I'm like everyone else, just waiting to see. I'm just looking forward to getting the film out there into the communities, and I want to be part of that, and I want to make sure it's done in the right way, hopefully, and in a way that honours the story itself,
The trailer gave me goose pimples.
Oh, I do. Yeah, I mean, it was a real experience, and I think next is just carrying on with the projects I've got started and trying to make them good. Trying to make them really good so that people like them, and get them onto stages. Get them onto stages or onto screens.
Have you been in a musical?
No, I've never done one. No, I'd love to do one. I've never done one. No,
me too. I'd love to do a musical.
When I'm old enough, I'll go and play Hugo in the West End. I'll have to wait till I'm I am old enough to play Hugo. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. How
I always said that. I'm like, well, he's always been kind of in his 50s, but I think maybe I'm getting to that age where I can play Hugo. But it terrifies me. I mean, the people that do it, they've done years and years of training for a reason. It's not easy. It's a real slog, and it takes real discipline, and it's 8 shows a week. It's a big deal. But
I know. I always think about that, 8 shows a week, and I always think, when do you get me time?
You don't. And also, the thing is, if your idea of me time is going out for a drink with your mates, there's just no way you can do it. You just can't, and because your voice will go, because you'll be in a bar and you'll be shouting over the music, and then that'll kill your voice. So really, me time is just like resting. So it's a tough one, but I think it depends on your part, love. Depends how big your part is. If you're on stage all the time, whoever plays Jamie, I tell you what. Well, not that question. But the lead role of Jamie is huge in the West End. It's a huge part. It's that character is always on the stage, and when they're not on the stage, they're doing a quick change backstage, and they're running to go to their dressing room, and there's very little time to sit down even, and it's a big old part to ask someone to play 8 times a week, and all of our cast have been incredible.
Are they all like late teens or a bit older?
They're normally in their early 20s when they play Jamie. Yeah. They I mean, just to have the stamina to do it. I don't think any of our Jamies have been under 20, but they're normally around that age, and that's just astonishing that they can even do it at that age. It's a big role for a young person.
Yeah, but it's just amazing, and the joy that they bring to everyone else. There you go. There's another form of joy that I get sitting there. I feel all emotions when I'm watching a musical, but especially that one. It was gorgeous. Right, I want to know who you think is shit in the music industry, so I'm going to wrap this up because it's playing on my mind. Thank you so much for talking to me today, though. It's been really nice getting to know you.
Thank you.
Have you enjoyed chatting?
listening to my rant. Listen. If it's not you, it'll be one of my mates down the pub later. So I'm glad that you got my rant for the day.
You say rant. You've got such a calming voice. I could genuinely listen to you forever.
I just feel like sometimes I need to put the world to rights, and that's what I do. I do it too often though, and when I've done it after a pint, I'm the worst. So I'm glad that I got it out of my system. And not rant as in angry, but I'm very opinionated, so I appreciate the outlet.
I like that. I like someone that's opinionated. I can be quite opinionated, but I try and rein it in every now and then. But I like someone being opinionated at me, with me, to me. So thank you very much again for joining me. And
thank you for having me.
And I'm glad that you've enjoyed it. So thank you very much, Dan. Take care.
Lots of love.
Yeah,
bye.
Take care. That's it for another episode of State of Mind with me, Richard Sefton. Like I said at the start, you can join me on Twitter at RichardSefton3. Come say hello, join in the conversation. It would be nice to hear from you. In the meantime, I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. I hope that you've enjoyed listening along. Go and have a chat, go and have a natter, and enjoy the week. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other.